The laughter in the dining room froze when my mother's voice sliced through the air like glass. Get out of my house and never come back. For a second, I thought I'd misheard, but the fury on her face told me she meant every word. So I stood, grabbed my bag, and walked out past the stunned silence of cousins and uncles who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. That night, I thought I was losing my family. But weeks later, when my father appeared at my apartment asking why I'd stopped paying their mortgage, I realized something darker. Before I tell you what happened that night, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever felt like the outsider at your own family's table. Don't forget to subscribe because this story doesn't just end with betrayal. It ends with a freedom I never thought I'd have. Growing up in my house was like living inside a glossy picture frame, one of those perfect family portraits you'd see in a dentist's waiting room. We looked normal on the outside, 2 parents, 2 kids, a nice little home in suburban Denver. But inside the frame, the glass was cracked. You just had to know where to look. My mother, Linda, held the brush that painted over every fracture. She was obsessed with appearances, with being admired. At church, at PTA meetings, even at the grocery store, she performed like the perfect mother in a commercial, hair done, polite smile, sweet words dripping from her lips. People adored her. They told me how lucky I was to have a mom so elegant, so invested. But behind closed doors, her voice sharpened into something different. Controlling, critical, unrelenting. My father, Robert, was the shadow in the corner. He worked long hours at a hardware distributor, came home drained, and sank into the couch like a man waiting out his own life. He wasn't cruel, just absent. His silence filled the house louder than any shout. When Mom raged, he let it happen. When she lectured me until I cried, he fixed his eyes on the TV hands gripping the armrest, like if he held on tight enough, he'd disappear. Then there was Ethan, my younger brother. If I was the one who tried to please her, he was the one who refused. He pierced his ears, blasted heavy metal from his bedroom, came home late smelling like smoke. Mom branded him a failure, a shame, the child she couldn't control. And maybe he was rebellious, but in his defiance there was a freedom I envied. Because in the vacuum Ethan left, I became her golden child. Not because I was naturally brilliant or perfect, but because I was desperate enough to try. I loved books. I liked school. I followed rules. It made me safe. Teachers praised me, neighbors congratulated Mom, and she wore my achievements like medals pinned to her chest. Every spelling bee ribbon, every honor roll certificate, she displayed them like they were hers, not mine. At first, I believed it was love. If I worked harder, I'd get more of it. But approval in our house was never unconditional. For every A on a test, she asked why it wasn't an A+. For every award, she'd find another daughter in town to compare me to. Pretty girls get further, Stella, she'd say, as she tugged at my plain cardigan. Don't think grades will make up for that. I remember one Sunday morning I was 12, standing barefoot in the kitchen making pancakes, Dad's favorite. I thought maybe if I had them ready before church, it would soften him enough to smile at me, to notice me. I burned the first batch, then the second, but finally I stacked a plate high and brought it to him while he sat in his recliner. He didn't look up from the TV. He just muttered, "Not hungry," and waved me away. The plate cooled on the counter until Mom found it and snapped, "Next time, clean up your mess." That was the rhythm of my childhood. Try, fail, repeat. I grew into responsibility like other kids grew into hobbies. I learned how to predict Mom's moods from the slam of a cupboard. I learned how to study in silence while Ethan blasted music to drown her out. I learned how to take criticism like vitamins, bitter but supposedly good for me. And somewhere in that process, I stopped knowing where her expectations ended and where I began. The trap was set early. Be good, be reliable, be the fixer, and maybe you'll be enough. And when the time came, years later, when Mom's demands shifted from grades to money, from approval to dependence, I didn't even question it. I was already trained to say yes. But even then, cracks showed. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across my walls, wondering if maybe Ethan had the right idea. Maybe chaos was better than being the quiet proof of Mom's perfection. Maybe rebellion was a kind of freedom. I'd hear his footsteps sneaking out the back door, the faint roar of his car engine in the driveway, and part of me longed to follow. Instead, I buried myself deeper. More homework, more smiles, more nods when Mom paraded me in front of relatives like a prized possession, and the more I performed, the more I felt hollow. It wasn't always bad. There were slivers of light moments I still cling to, like the time I won first place in the state essay competition, and Dad actually hugged me awkward and stiff, but real. Or the summer night, Ethan and I sat on the roof sharing a bag of stale chips, and he told me, "You don't have to be her. You know that, right?" I laughed it off back then, but the truth stuck like a splinter under my skin. By the time I turned 18, I was exhausted, not from the work, but from the performance. And when I packed my bags for college Arizona State business management, far enough to breathe but close enough for Mom to still claim credit, it felt like oxygen filling my lungs for the first time. I thought leaving meant escape. I thought distance meant freedom. But I had no idea that Mom's grip reached farther than Denver, farther than state lines. That one day, years later, she'd turn all that training, all those years of conditioning into a weapon, and I would be the one paying the price. College had felt like freedom, but freedom has a way of shrinking once the phone rings with your mother's number flashing across the screen. By then, I was 22, living in Phoenix, proud of my first real job at a real estate firm and still decorating my one bedroom, like it was a promise. I had a used Honda, a second-hand sofa, and an income that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I'd finally stepped out from under my mother's shadow. That illusion cracked on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. I was at my desk, shuffling property listings trying to impress my manager when the call came. Mom. My thumb hovered over decline, but guilt pressed accept. What I heard on the other end wasn't the usual sharpness, but sobbing. Violent hiccuping sobs that made me sit up straighter. "Stella, we're going to lose everything," she wailed. "The bank sent papers. They're going to take the house." My mind went blank. For all her dramatics, this sounded different. Real. She spilled fragments through the tears. Dad had been laid off months ago, his warehouse job erased by corporate restructuring. He was too old, too unskilled, according to the HR rejection letters. Mom's part-time receptionist job barely kept food on the table. They were 4 months behind on the mortgage. How much I asked, my voice already too calm, as if part of me had rehearsed this moment all my life. $7,600, she sniffled. "And we don't even know how we'll pay next month." I leaned back in my office chair, staring at the ceiling tiles like maybe the answer was hidden there. My savings wasn't huge, just a careful pile I'd built dollar by dollar since college. It was meant for me, for a down payment on my own house someday, for trips I hadn't taken, for proof that my life belonged to me now. But in that moment, I felt the leash snap tight around my throat. That weekend, I drove back to Denver. The house looked at the same perfect lawn, freshly painted shutters, but inside the air was suffocating. Dad sat in the recliner, shoulders collapsed inward, eyes glued to nothing. Mom clutched a stack of bank papers like props in a play, sighing loudly as relatives dropped by to check in. She never once suggested downsizing, never once mentioned selling her endless furniture or cutting back. No, the solution had already been written in invisible ink across my forehead. "Stella will fix this." On Monday, I sat in the mortgage officer's office, my hands sweating against the paperwork. I showed him my pay stubs, my credit score, my savings account. Together, we patched a deal. I paid the overdue $7,600 up front and arranged automatic transfers of $1,900 every month. They'd stay on the loan, but I'd be the one carrying the weight. The officer smiled kindly. "Think of it as family assistance," he said, spinning the humiliation into something noble. Mom cried with relief, hugging me as if I had pulled her from a burning building. Dad muttered a soft "thank you" before sinking back into silence. I told myself it was temporary, just until Dad found work, just until they got back on their feet. But as I drove back to Phoenix that night, headlights streaking against the dark highway, a heaviness filled my chest. I had just shackled myself to a secret $1,900 every month, more than my rent, more than my car payment. And somehow I couldn't even bring myself to say no, because saying no had never been an option in our house. The months bled into years. Each 15th of the month, the transfer vanished like clockwork. $1,900 gone. That's $800 a year. Add the initial $7,600 bailout plus every emergency mom invented car repairs, overdraft fees, broken appliances. By year 6, I had poured nearly $150,000 into a house that wasn't mine. Money that could have built my future instead cemented theirs. And the worst part, gratitude never came. If anything, Mom sharpened her knives. The minute the bank stopped breathing down her neck, she started spending again: new clothes, salon highlights, granite countertops, a 70-inch TV, a luxury bedroom set. Every time I visited, she paraded her purchases like jewels. Look at my new purse, Stella. After everything I've been through, I deserve nice things. Meanwhile, I drove the same Honda-declined vacations with friends, skipped dinners because I couldn't afford them. I lived like someone making half my salary while secretly bankrolling my parents' fantasy life. My friends thought I was cheap. My boyfriend, Daniel, grew resentful. "It's like you're married to them instead of me," he told me one night before walking out the door. And he wasn't wrong. By the 4th year, panic attacks started. I'd wake up gasping the night before the transfer cleared my chest, tightening as if the money were being pulled straight from my lungs. I tried therapy, but therapy meant time and money I didn't have. I was chained, drowning, and every smile from my mother felt like another stone tied to my ankles. Still, I stayed silent. I told no one. Because in my family, being the responsible one wasn't a choice, it was a sentence. And deep down, some part of me feared that if I stopped paying, I wouldn't just lose their house. I'd lose my place in the family forever. I didn't realize then that losing it might be the only way I'd ever be free. The night my mother screamed, "Get out of my house and never come back," in front of a room full of relatives, something inside me snapped, not with a bang, but with a strange, terrifying calm. I left in silence, heels clicking against the tile purse strap, digging into my shoulder like an anchor finally breaking loose. For the first time in years, there were no words left to bargain with, just exit. Back in my apartment, I sat staring at the glow of my laptop. My hands trembled as I pulled up my bank account. The familiar automatic transfer sat there like a predator waiting in the dark, $1,900 scheduled to vanish on the 15th, just as it had for 72 months. 6 years, $150,000. All of it feeding a house that had just spit me out like a parasite. My finger hovered over the cancel recurring payment button. For a moment, guilt clawed at me, whispering the same lines I'd lived under my entire life. What if they lose everything? What if Dad ends up on the street? What if Mom actually meant it when she said never come back? Then I heard her voice in my head, sharp and final. "Get out. Never come back." I clicked. A confirmation window popped up. "Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment?" "Yes," I whispered into the empty room, pressing confirm. And just like that, the cord snapped. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't bleeding money into their house. My chest didn't tighten at the sight of the balance. The silence in my apartment felt different, no longer heavy, but clean like air after a thunderstorm. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. What exactly had I been funding all this time? Years in real estate had taught me how to dig. Property records, loan histories, liens, they were all public if you knew where to look. I opened a new browser tab, hands steady now, and began to pull threads. What unraveled made my stomach turn. 18 months earlier, my mother had taken out a home equity line of credit, $52,000. She hadn't mentioned it once, not in her endless complaints about being broke, not in her guilt trips about sacrifices, not even in her rage when I revealed the mortgage payments. She had borrowed against the house I was keeping afloat, using my payments as leverage for her shopping sprees and remodels. The list of expenditures matched perfectly: the granite countertops, the remodeled bathroom with its rainfall shower, the new deck she showed off like royalty. Every shiny object she flaunted had been carved out of money she never earned, money that only existed because I was draining myself dry. I dug deeper. Employment records, benefit claims. That's when I found the kicker: unemployment benefits in her name. According to the state, Mom hadn't been working at the dental clinic for months. She'd been cashing unemployment checks while still pretending she clocked in every morning, parading around as the hardworking matriarch. Another lie stacked on top of the rest. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it pressing down. She hadn't just used me. She'd built an entire fantasy world on my back. And then when caught, she banished me like trash. But here's the thing, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call anyone. Instead, I sat there in the quiet glow of the screen and felt a strange calm spread through me. For the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling to fix someone else's mess. I wasn't bracing for another demand. I wasn't a lifeline. I was just Stella. The silence held for a week. No calls, no texts, no guilt-drenched voicemails. Blissful nothing. By the second week, the messages started first. Dad's confused, hesitant voicemails about a bank error. Then, Mom's icy silence. I ignored them all. Each unanswered call was a small rebellion, a quiet counterattack more powerful than any shouting match could have been, because silence is louder than words when you've been conditioned to perform your whole life. And in that silence, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't their fixer, their golden child, their quiet wallet. I was free. But freedom has a cost, and soon I'd find out how desperate they were willing to become once they realized the cord had truly been cut. The silence didn't last. For the first week after I canceled the payments, it was almost eerie. No calls, no texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. My phone sat silent on my nightstand, and every morning I woke up with a rush of relief so sharp it felt dangerous, like taking a breath after holding it underwater for too long. But peace never lasts in families like mine. By the second week, the messages began to drip through. First came Dad, soft, hesitant voicemails, his voice quivering like a man walking on broken glass. Stella. I think there's been some kind of bank error. The payment didn't go through. Can you call me back? The second message. Maybe you changed accounts. Could you update the information? The mortgage company called us and your mother is upset. I didn't respond. When silence met him, Mom finally broke. The texts arrived in a flood, one after another, each more desperate than the last. Stella, please call me. I'm sorry. We need to talk. Don't let the bank take our home. You don't understand how bad this will look. I was wrong. You're a good daughter. Please help us. I deleted everyone without answering. For the first time, I wasn't swallowing the bait. But she escalated. By week 3, cousins were texting me out of nowhere. Your mom said you abandoned them. What's going on? They said you stopped helping and now they're about to be homeless. The smear campaign had begun. Mom, the queen of appearances, couldn't tolerate her perfect family image cracking. So she painted me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter, the selfish career woman who turned her back on her aging parents. I could almost hear her rehearsed lines in my head. We sacrificed everything for her, and now she's left us with nothing. But here's the difference this time. I didn't crumble. I didn't call Karen to explain. I didn't defend myself against whispered accusations. I let them talk. Because defending yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you is like screaming into a void. It only drains you further. Then came the knock. It was a Tuesday night. I'd just finished cooking pasta garlic still lingering in the kitchen when my building manager called up Stella. There's a Robert downstairs. Says he's your father. Should I send him up for a moment? I froze. Part of me wanted to say no, to lock the door and pretend I wasn't home. But curiosity and maybe that old reflex of obedience made me whisper, "Let him up." When I opened the door, my father stood there like a ghost of himself. His frame had shrunk, his clothes hung loose, and his eyes were swollen red. He looked 10 years older than the man I'd seen at the party. Stella. He breathed relief washing over his face. Thank God. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. I know, I said flatly. I got the messages. He stepped inside, shoulders sagging as he sank onto my couch. He buried his face in his hands, shaking. I'm so sorry about what happened at the party. Your mother, she was out of line. She didn't mean it. I leaned against the armchair across from him, my arms folded tight. Which part didn't she mean? Calling me arrogant? Or telling me to get out of her house and never come back? He winced like I'd slapped him. She was just angry. You know how she gets when she feels cornered. Cornered, I laughed bitterly. Dad, I've been paying your mortgage for 6 years. The only reason she felt cornered was because she got caught living off my money while tearing me down. His eyes filled with tears. We know you've been helping us, and we're grateful. Grateful, my voice cut sharp cold. In 6 years, not once did either of you say thank you. Not once did she acknowledge what I was doing. Instead, she criticized my job, my boyfriend, my life, and I still kept you afloat. He looked shattered lips trembling. I know we failed you. But Stella, please, you have to understand. We're going to lose the house. The bank started foreclosure proceedings. We have 30 days. There it was. The real reason he came. Not for an apology, not for reconciliation, for rescue. Again. And you want me to fix it? I said quietly. Yes, he whispered, his voice breaking. If you could just restart the payments. Maybe talk to the bank, explain. We'll make it right this time, I swear. Your mother knows she went too far. She's been crying for days. I studied him, this man who had been silent my entire childhood. Silent through Mom's tirades, silent through my tears, silent when I begged for someone to defend me, and now he was here begging for me to save them again. Where is she now? I asked coldly. If she's so sorry, why didn't she come herself? He hesitated. She's embarrassed. She didn't think you'd want to see her. I almost laughed. So she sent you to clean up her mess. Again. Typical. His hands trembled. Please, Stella, I'm begging you. We'll lose everything. I leaned forward, voice calm but razor sharp. No, Dad. You already lost everything. You lost it the moment Mom decided her pride was more important than me. The moment she threw me out instead of admitting the truth. Tears spilled down his face. He broke then, full-on, sobbing shoulders, shaking like a child. We can change. She'll apologize. I'll make her apologize. Just give us one more chance. I shook my head. You had 6 years of chances, and you wasted every single one. Silence filled the room, heavy and final. For once, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. For once, the weight wasn't mine to carry. Finally, I stood and walked to the door. This conversation is over, Dad. You need to leave. He rose slowly, face pale. At the doorway, he turned back, desperation in his eyes. What if your mother calls? What if she apologizes? She won't, I said simply. And even if she does, it won't matter. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. I closed the door behind him, my hands steady. On the other side, I heard him break again, a muffled sob echoing down the hall as his footsteps retreated. But for the first time in my life, I felt something he never could. I felt free. 2 weeks after my father left my apartment in tears, the texts began again. Not from him this time, from her. The first one was short. Stella, please call me. I'm sorry. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long time before pressing delete. The second came a day later. Please don't let the bank take our home. I'll do anything. Just call me. Delete. By the end of that week, there were 15 more. I was wrong. You're a good daughter. Please help us. We can fix this. Just 1 more month. Please. I love you. Please don't do this to us. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, she had never once said the words I was wrong. Now they showed up in my inbox like cheap confetti, too late, too desperate, too easy to discard. And discard them I did, one by one. For the first time, the guilt didn't strangle me. Instead, I felt cold clarity. They weren't my problem anymore. I had carried them for 6 years, given them the best of my youth, drained myself into their comfort. And what had I gotten in return? Criticism, manipulation, humiliation. The night she threw me out, she made her choice. Now I was making mine. A week later, I drove through their neighborhood on my way to a client meeting. My chest tightened as I turned the familiar corner, the rows of manicured lawns blurring past. Then I saw it. A foreclosure notice taped to the front door, a for sale by owner sign planted in the grass I'd once mowed as a teenager. Through the window, I saw movement. Then, suddenly, her. My mother standing in the living room, her figure framed by the very house she'd once called her kingdom. She spotted my car and bolted outside, waving her arms like she could stop time. "Stella!" she shouted, her voice cracking across the street. I didn't slow down. In the rearview mirror, I saw her sink to her knees on the lawn, clutching her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs so violent they bent her forward like the weight of her own pride had finally crushed her. Once that sight would have broken me. Once I would have pulled over, rushed to her side, promised I'd fix everything. But that version of me was gone. They lost the house within the month. The family grapevine carried the details like wildfire: the sheriff's notice, the auction, the shame of packing boxes into a U-Haul under the eyes of neighbors. They downsized into a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. Dad picked up shifts bagging groceries. Mom got a job at a call center answering complaint calls from strangers all day. The life she once sneered at the ordinary low-class existence was now hers. At Christmas, an invitation arrived in my mailbox. Their new return address scribbled in small embarrassed letters. "We'd love for you to come. We want to start over." I didn't go. I had other plans. Some people would call me cruel. They'd say I should have forgiven been the bigger person, extended one last olive branch. But those people never lived in my skin. They never carried the weight of someone else's entitlement until it hollowed them out. They never had their own mother stand in front of a room full of relatives and declare them unwelcome. Forgiveness isn't a free pass, it's a privilege. And they had burned through that privilege long ago. Meanwhile, my life blossomed in ways I hadn't thought possible. Daniel came back. Without the drain of constant payments, I had space for love again. He told me he barely recognized the woman I used to be: tired, stretched thin, weighed down by invisible chains. "You finally look free," he said. For the first time, I believed him. We got engaged that fall. I bought my own house, a modest 2-bedroom with a garden where wildflowers bloom every spring. Every night I lock my own door, sleep under my own roof, and know it belongs to me. No hidden costs. No secret shackles. Just mine. On my birthday, a card arrived in the mail, Mom's handwriting on the envelope. I didn't even open it. I already knew the script: "I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you." I dropped it straight into the trash. Because here's the truth: some bridges deserve to stay burned. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences. My parents taught me that, and I taught myself something too: that being family doesn't give anyone the right to drain you dry. That love without respect is just manipulation, and that sometimes the most powerful word you can say, the word that saves your life, isn't yes. It's enough. When you grow up being told your worth is measured in what you provide, it's terrifying to stop providing. For years, I believed love was conditional, that the only way to keep my place in the family was to pay for it: grades, achievements, then money. Walking away from that contract felt like stepping off a cliff. But here's the secret I wish I'd known earlier. Sometimes the fall is really just flight. The weeks after my parents lost their house were strangely quiet. No more panicked calls about overdue bills. No more demands disguised as compliments. No more weight pressing down on my chest every time the 15th rolled around. For the first time since I was 18, I felt what adulthood should feel like mine. I filled my new house with color: cheap thrift store paintings, a couch in a shade of blue my mother would have hated, plants I remembered she once said were too messy. Every little choice felt like rebellion. Or maybe not rebellion, maybe restoration. Like I was finally piecing together the parts of me that had been silenced for so long. Daniel noticed it first. "You laugh more now," he said one evening as we cooked dinner together, the smell of garlic filling a kitchen that actually belonged to me. "You don't even realize it, but you're lighter. Like you finally put something heavy down." And he was right. For years, my laughter had been muted, trapped behind obligation. Now it came easier, bubbling up even in small moments: sunlight on the garden, the hum of the dishwasher, his hand brushing mine. I used to think family was unbreakable, that blood meant duty, that love was sacrifice. But what I've learned is more complicated and more freeing. Family without respect is just a cage. Sacrifice without gratitude is slavery. And sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to burn the bridge they keep using to walk over you. The echoes still reach me sometimes. On quiet nights, I hear Mom's voice in my head, "Get out of my house and never come back." For a long time, those words haunted me. Now they feel like a release, a blessing wrapped in cruelty. Because she was right. I never went back. And I'm better for it. I think about my father, too. His silence, his tears on my couch, his begging. I don't hate him. I pity him. He taught me what happens when you spend a lifetime looking away instead of standing up. His silence was his choice. My voice was mine. And Ethan, my brother, the one who escaped early, even if his escape looked messy. We've talked more these past few years than we ever did growing up. He told me once you finally stopped being her soldier. I didn't answer then, but I think he's right. Maybe we both found freedom in our own ways. The cost was high. 6 years, $150,000, a piece of my youth I'll never get back. But I gained something priceless in return. Self-respect. Peace. The knowledge that I don't owe anyone my life just because they share my last name. When I look back, the lesson is simple but sharp. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you belong to. Sometimes love means letting go. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do, the thing that changes everything, is to say no. So here I am now, a home of my own, a partner who loves me for who I am, not what I give. A future that feels like mine, finally. And when I walk through my garden watching wildflowers bloom in colors my mother would have scorned, I feel no guilt. Just gratitude for myself for the strength it took to walk away for the bridge I burned that lit my path forward. Because in the end, this story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about freedom. About the cost of finally saying enough, and I paid it gladly. Have you ever felt trapped between guilt and freedom, like you owed your family more than you could give? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you found your way out. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful family stories. Your support helps us keep telling the truth most people stay silent about.